But first up, the March for Our Lives protest is taking place across the world. Students, teachers, parents and survivors of mass shootings have gathered in Washington, D.C. in support of tighter gun control. We're cutting across to live visuals from Pennsylvania Avenue near the White House, near the Capitol building. These are live visuals demanding gun violence be brought to an end and for stricter legislation for guns in the United States. This protest has grown out of a movement calling for change after 17 people were killed, many of them young students, when a gunman opened fire at a high school in Florida just last month. The gunman turned out to be a former student at the very same school. Now, this entire episode isn't new to America. The United States has seen multiple mass shooting events in its modern history. Just last year, what's described as one of the worst mass shootings in the United States modern history took place in Las Vegas when a man opened fire from the Mandalay Bay Resort from his hotel room in that resort in Las Vegas at concert goers down below, killing 58 people and injuring more than 800. That was last year. The year before that, it was, or rather in the same year, it was a shootout at a Florida nightclub, at the Pulse nightclub, where again lots of party goers were killed in cold blood in a mass shooting. And this year, what's happened in Florida has really opened up a groundswell of emotion across the United States. Varied voices, be it celebrities, be it young people, students who've really been at the forefront of this demand for a change in both attitude and policy when it comes to guns in the United States. They've taken charge. This is called the March for Our Lives. It is a protest taking place simultaneously in 800 places across the world. We'll be getting you visuals as in when they come in from different parts of the globe with this protest taking on a bigger tenor. But for now, these are live visuals on your screen from Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., where so many people have gathered to voice their protests against what's called the gun culture in the United States. And more than 500,000 people are expected at the biggest protest in Washington, D.C. itself. There are going to be 800 system marches planned across the United States and in other parts of the world. The visuals there telling a story of its own. This isn't just about a few people. This is really speaking a voice that's been suppressed for a very long time. This is, remember, the largest movement of its kind seen by the United States in 17 years. The last one was the Million Mom March, which took place in 2000. This time at the forefront, interestingly, are young people. There are students, people who've walked out of high schools and middle schools across the country to voice protests about what they call a lack of will from politicians. Remember, the gun lobby in the United States, it's called the National Rifle Association, is one of the most powerful political lobbies in the country. Many politicians owe financial allegiance to the NRA. They receive huge funds. They are backed in many ways financially when it comes to campaigning, when it comes to running advertisements during the campaign periods. The NRA pays big bucks to these politicians, which is a nexus that these young people have called out while protesting against the gun laws in the United States. This is going to be our focus on this show today. We're going to take you through some of the reactions that have come in already on this story. Remember, it's not just about today. It has sort of boiled over into sentiment on the streets today in the size of the protest that you're looking at right now. But really speaking, ever since February 14th, ever since that shooting at the Parkland High School in Florida, there have been multiple voices that have come out and spoken against the gun culture in the United States. Let's listen into some of those reactions, and then we'll of course come back to our visuals from Washington, D.C.
The media comes out for the things that are rare to happen, and I feel like that even goes to show that they know it's normal in our neighborhood, which is why they don't bring it out every day. they know that it's routine for us. And I feel like because I could wake up every day, I'm surviving the natural. I'm surviving my norm. I feel like I'm a hero in itself just by being able to walk the streets in my neighborhood and go to school every day and make it back.
Is more positivity. Instead of going to school and your teacher saying something negative to you, how about, hey, how are you doing today? Ask about their home, because more than likely if a child is misbehaving in your class, it's because something is probably going on at home. So instead of trying to bring them down, try to empower them, try to empower your class. Don't tell us any more negative things because we don't want to hear it.
Right, so two young women there voicing what they say is protest against what's going on in schools across the country. There have been limitless mass shootings at schools, especially in the United States, something that's been of great concern. Remember, gun laws in the US are not governed by a federal policy or a federal law. Laws differ from state to state. Therefore, the age of purchase is also different from state to state. There's also, of course, a controversial, let's say, equipment available in the market. For instance, bump stocks. Those are, of course, sort of transformative materials that can be added to a semi-automatic weapon, which allows it to function as a machine gun. A bump stock was what the Las Vegas shooter had utilized in that massacre last year at the Mandalay Bay Resort. That has come into question in a big way. People are asking why civilians need to be armed with automatic or semi-automatic weapons at all, when weapons are usually used only by civilian populations in self-defense. So there are a number of questions that come to mind when we're trying to understand where exactly to situate this passion for guns as it exists in the United States. But as you can see on your screens, there seems to be a proportionate passion against guns, an emotion, a sentiment that has swelled over into the scenes that we're seeing on our screens right now. My colleague Andy Rosejohn is joining us from Chicago for more on that story. Andy, the visuals tell the story quite perfectly, in my opinion. This is a groundswell. This is emotion out on the streets, and a very strong emotion following what happened in Florida last month.
And the goal really is to get a powerful message to the leaders of Washington. Unfortunately, President Trump himself is not in Washington today. He's in Mar-a-Lago, Florida this weekend. Many members of Congress are out of Washington as well. But still, as you said, the visuals there are what's important. That's beaming out across the world. There are similar marches in respect to this march as well in other cities around the nation, in Chicago and Baltimore, Los Angeles. And the goal is, of course, to get lawmakers more concerned about gun control. You might notice that there are some of the marchers marching with gloves that have eyes on them, like evil eyes. Well, that comes from the same creator who created those pink pussy hats during the Women's March on Washington after the inauguration of President Trump. Those eyes are meant to symbolize that the world is watching, that people are watching to see what lawmakers will do in response to these marches.
Absolutely. And help us understand, in this part of the world, Andy, especially, the role that the National Rifle Association plays in all of this. Help us understand what sort of, a lobby the NRA is and what it means for the powerful and elite of Washington, D.C.
An incredibly powerful lobby, the National Rifle Association. It didn't used to be like this. Actually, back in the 50s, the 60s, early on, the National Rifle Association was fine with measures of gun control. It was much more of a hunting and sportsman's kind of organization. But over the years, it became more hard-line, and any suggestion of gun control in the last few decades has been shot down by the NRA. They are vehemently against any kind of gun control. Many people in America disagree with them. Actually, many people disagree with them and feel they've gone way too hard line, that they've gone off the deep end. But the National Rifle Association has held firm, and they fund many campaigns, and they contribute big amounts of money to lawmakers. So that's why they've got those lawmakers, some would say, in their pocket when it comes to gun control issues.
Fair enough. Would it be fair to say also that the NRA enjoys a closer relationship with the Republican Party than the Democrats, or is that perhaps too simplified a view of the relationship between the NRA and political outfits in the U.S.?
Oh, no, absolutely. The NRA is almost exclusively a Republican Party type of organization. They contribute heavily to candidates. In fact, several years ago, maybe it was a decade or so ago, maybe 2 decades ago, they started grading politicians. And in other words, when they would contribute to a politician, they would expect in return votes in Congress that would support the NRA, that would shoot down gun control. And they grade them on a scale of A, B, C, D, E, and F. And those those congressmen and politicians who do the most for the NRA get an A rating. Those who do the least for them, who are the most anti-NRA, the most pro-gun control, get an F rating. And those ratings mean something. And that's how the NRA has managed to do its grading system here. A very powerful group, but in answer to your question, yes, they really are a Republican Party group more than anything else.
All right. And to help us understand this protest a little better, Andy, we can see that it seems like high school students are at the forefront of this demand for change. But what are those demands? What are they hopeful of when it comes to changing the legislation, given that it differs from state to state?
Well, what they're hoping is a federal kind of gun control. You know, we did have in the United States, we had an assault weapons ban for 10 years. From 1994 to 2004, President George W. Bush allowed that ban to expire, and a lot of people want to see that ban return. Now, that would seem almost hard to imagine in today's climate, but really, it's got the best shot ever, really, with this kind of marching and with this kind of activism going on, to see a return of the assault weapons ban. That's a ban on assault weapons. Again, lasted for 10 years. They would love to see that come back. These marchers, by the way, they're not just marching, but they're also carrying on a voter registration drive as part of this march to get people registered to vote, hopefully in their favor, they say. There's also a concert involved. There's also a candlelight vigil. So there's a lot of things involved in this march, but the bottom line is they want to see gun control. Now, some people have talked about minor measures, keeping track of people's purchases, things like that.
Right.
But the main goal is to get these guns off the streets.
Fair enough. Stay with me, Andy. We're hearing some reactions from the march itself. Let's listen in.
Legislators whose priority is children's safety over guns. The question that I have to bring to you today is, what parent would break an honorable promise to their child? This movement took off immediately. We started receiving positive, inspiring feedback from around the world. We unexpectedly received so many requests from grandparents for their own special version that we created a grandparents contract. We also received so many messages and requests from people without children that wanted to be involved that we created another contract on behalf of America's children. We have thousands of signed contracts, but it's not enough. We need more to make a true difference. Let me be clear. A thumbs up, a like on Facebook, or even a follow on Twitter is not enough. We need your uploaded pictures of you and your families with signed contracts posted and shared on Facebook, and hashtag PPTK, and retweets on Twitter. Anything less will be failing our mission. This is not an awareness movement. It is a change movement that requires action by all of you. Parents, grandparents, anyone, I want you to promise your loved ones right now that you will sign and upload a contract that you promise to vote for legislators that choose children's safety over guns. We are counting on you. The children are counting on you. And all the kids who are out there listening today, we need your help to get your parents to promise you by signing a contract. We are the generation that is not going to allow this to happen again. Join our movement and help be a part of the change. Give the children a voice. Give the children a voice to let legislators know children's safety is more important than guns. I promise you that we will not let Parkland be known as a town that had another massacre. but rather a tight-knit community led by its students who banded together after a horrific event on February 14th that created positive change. For common sense gun laws, and most importantly, ensuring that all children feel safe in their schools. And this is why I march.
All right. So, of course, we are going to hear more student speakers who have been at the forefront of this demand for change. A number of them are expected to speak today as well. Let me go back to my colleague Andy Rosejen, who continues to be with us from Chicago to understand more the impact and import of what's going on. Andy, this is, of course, a groundswell. We're seeing people come out on the streets and make their protests known. Help us understand also this whole idea of the bump stock, this conversion of semi-automatic weapons into machine gun operable type of weapons. Why has this also become such an integral part of the conversation against the gun culture in the United States?
Well, we all really heard about bump stocks for the first time, those of us who really weren't into guns. Everyone just sort of heard about it for the first time after the Las Vegas shooting. The shooting in Las Vegas back on October 1st that killed close to 60 people. The gunman in that shooting used bump stocks to take automatic weapons and bump them up to even more lethal devices. And that, again, was the first time most people had ever heard of bump stocks. And right after that shooting, in Congress, there was a lot of talk about tackling bump stocks. But you know what? It went nowhere, as all talk of gun control so often does. It just fell apart. Well, after the Parkland shooting in Florida last month, suddenly that issue raised up again. And the reason why is this. A lot of people who are in favor of keeping guns the way they are don't want to see assault weapons banned. But they thought to themselves, well, the Parkland shooting was so bad, let's go back to bump stocks, which is sort of gun control, but not really gun control, and we'll let them have that because Parkland was such an awful shooting. So the president did say, and he did announce this week, that he would ban bump stocks in the United States. So that is sort of throwing folks a bone here. But the folks at Parkland, as you heard there, they're not having that. That is simply not enough in their view. They want those assault weapons banned.
Right. And would it be fair to say, Andy, that the president himself has sort of tried to walk at least the middle path in all of this? He's not openly gone against the NRA, but there have been statements from him which have surprised a number of people, given that he is a Republican, given his relationship with the NRA. Do you think he's trying to tread the middle path, the middle ground here?
He was right after Parkland. Right after Parkland, when the feelings were so raw and so many people were furious about guns and the politicians who support the NRA, he tried to sort of walk a sort of fine line. In fact, he pointed to a Republican senator in the room and said, you know, you're afraid of the NRA and don't be afraid of the NRA. So he was trying to sort of sound like he was, you know, aligning himself with some gun control measures. But ultimately, that never happened. And the outline proposals that the White House put out have far less teeth than what these activists in Washington are calling for. And he met with the NRA, and he backed down, basically, in a lot of ways. So the White House has recommended some minor changes to gun laws, mainly how to track people who buy guns and making sure that they are allowable to buy guns, but no suggestion at all of banning any kind of weapons.
Okay, and how exactly is the NRA reacting to these protests, Andy? This is a big one, of course, with so many people out on the street. But there's been a lot of vocal protests against gun laws in the United, or lack thereof, in the United States since the Parkland shooting. How has the gun lobby sort of retaliated?
The NRA has been more vocal than it usually is. Right after Parkland, right after a mass shooting, the NRA tends to shut up. It just goes quiet. It doesn't want to say anything. It kind of wants to let everything pass over, and then eventually they come out of the woodwork again and say no gun control. After the Parkland shooting, they were more vocal. It took a few days, but they started to come out, and they have been saying look, we need more guns in schools. I mean, as crazy as that might sound to a lot of people, they want teachers who are armed. They think teachers should be armed with more guns. So their solution was to bring more guns into schools so teachers could have them to fight off shooters. You know, it's really been a more forceful look from them, but they're not backing down, not at all. And as far as these marchers, they have derided these kids in a lot of ways. They've said these kids are pawns of gun control groups, that these kids really don't have much thought process going into this. They've accused the Democratic Party of organizing all this. They say it's all political. But in many ways, these Parkland students are saying, look, this is political. We want it to be political because that's how you affect change. So the NRA has certainly not backed down and has been just as strong as ever in fighting against these kids.
Andy Rosen, thanks very much for joining us from Chicago. We'll, of course, get back to you later on in the evening for more on that developing story. It has started. The march has begun in Washington, D.C. Before we go any further, though, let's listen into the mother of one of the victims of this mass shooting. Let's listen into what she says.
A few weeks after Carmen left this earth, her teacher returned Carmen's sonnet to me. It reads, Sonnet to Mom by Carmen Schentrup. What do you give someone who has it all? You don't drink wine. I can't afford taking you out to dine. You rarely enjoy shopping at the mall. And your shoe collection is by no means small. When it comes to makeup, well, you just borrow mine. And Dad already bought you the entire Amazon Echo line. The question of what to get you is driving me up the wall. But then I realize it's not the things, the clothes, shoes, or food that you love, although chocolate certainly helps too. It's doing something small that really sings. How my love for you will last when you're up above, and my life is better being with you. In this poem written the day before her death, Carmen understood that parents are supposed to go up above before their children, and love is the greatest gift. This Lent has been full of pain and suffering for my family. As a woman of faith, I can say prayers have helped me find strength to get through each day and stand here before you. But as a mother who mourns the death of one child and fights to protect the future of her two other children, I can honestly say that prayers do not feel like enough. We must act. We must act to change current laws that allow profound devastation and heartbreak.
Right, so visuals now on your screen of two parallel protests taking place in the United States as part of the March for Our Lives rally asking for stricter gun legislation in the United States. The visuals on your left from Washington, D.C., the one on your right from Parkland itself. Florida is the state where Parkland High School is, Marjorie Stoneman High School specifically, where that horrific mass shooting took place on February 14th of this year, killing 17 students, staff members, all gunned down by a former student who has since been apprehended. He is incarcerated at the moment.